So imagine for a second that you are like a highly skilled perfumer.
Okay, perfumer.
Right. Your entire life is dedicated to this really delicate art of mixing essential oils and, working with rare spices.
Very specialized work.
Exactly. And then one day, somebody just hands you a heavy iron trowel, points you toward a massive pile of rubble, and basically tells you that you need to start pouring concrete and laying stone for a military bunker.
That is quite the career shift.
Right. Or imagine this scenario. You are dragging literal tons of completely unprotected gold and silver through a desert.
A bandit-infested desert, no less.
Yes, for 4 straight months. And all because your leader was, too proud to ask the local emperor for an army escort.
It sounds like a total nightmare.
It really does. And today, we are completely tearing up that tidy, happily ever after script of ancient history.
It's a phenomenal reality check, honestly. Because we have this tendency to view historical liberations as these very clean breaks.
Oh, for sure. Like a movie ending.
Right. The oppressor's defeated, the captives are freed, the music swells, and, everyone just walks back into their ancestral homeland to live out a golden age.
But the reality on the ground is, well, it's so much darker and so much more complex.
And frankly, a lot more fascinating.
Absolutely. So welcome to this deep dive into our source material for today. We are looking at a stack of Hebrew and English translations of the ancient texts of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Which are incredible historical documents.
They really are. And if you're listening right now and thinking that this is just some dry, dusty lesson from antiquity, well, think again.
Yeah, this is not a boring history lecture.
Not at all. Our mission today is to trace this epic 3-stage journey of the Israelites returning to Jerusalem from their Babylonian exile.
It really is a masterclass in resilience.
It is. Resilience, high-stakes geopolitics, and honestly, the brutal, unglamorous mechanics of community building.
So to understand the stakes of this first stage, we really have to establish what a 70-year exile actually does to a civilization.
Right, because we throw that number around 70 years, but that's a massive amount of time.
Exactly. Decades prior, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar completely decimated Jerusalem. I mean, he leveled the walls, burned the temple to the ground, and dragged the surviving population off to Babylon.
Just a total eradication of the society there?
Complete erasure. So when we say 70 years in exile, we were talking about 3 entire generations.
Wow, 3 generations.
Right, so the people returning, they aren't just going back to their old houses. They have literally never seen Jerusalem.
Oh, that's such a good point. It's not a homecoming for them, really.
No, not practically.
Yeah.
They don't know the landscape. They've absorbed Babylonian culture, and their ancestral homeland is basically nothing but a ghost town of ruins.
And then the geopolitical tectonic plates just completely shift.
Overnight, almost.
Yeah, the Babylonians are conquered by the Persian Empire, and in his very first year of rule, King Cyrus of Persia issues this shocking decree.
It's a massive turning point in history.
I'm looking at Ezra chapter 1 here, and Cyrus proclaims that the God of heaven has given him all the kingdoms of the earth, and he says he's actually been charged to build a house in Jerusalem.
Which is wild for a Persian king to say.
Right. He tells the Israelites they can go home, and he is going to fund the rebuilding of their temple.
It sounds so benevolent on the surface.
Well, see, that's where I have to push back on this narrative a bit. Wait, we're painting the Persians as these brilliant, tolerant strategists, but aren't they just running a massive mafia protection racket here?
That is a very interesting way to put it.
I mean, empires don't just hand out freedom and treasury funds out of the goodness of their hearts, right? It feels very much like, I'll pay for your temple, but you owe me your loyalty and your taxes.
Well, that is the exact mechanism at play, honestly. And it represents a massive revolution in how empires operated at the time.
How so?
So the Babylonians ruled through terror, right? Forced deportation, the erasure of local identities. They took the physical artifact of conquered religions and locked them in their own temples as trophies.
Like the ultimate power flex.
Exactly. But the Persians realized that running a sprawling, multi-ethnic empire entirely on fear is, what's exhausting.
Inexpensive, I'd imagine.
Very. And ultimately unstable. You need compliance. You need the locals to basically police themselves.
So you buy them off by giving them their culture back.
Precisely the strategy. By allowing displaced people to return home, the Persians were creating these fiercely loyal buffer states at the edges of their empire.
That makes so much political sense.
It does. The text tells us Cyrus returned 5,400 gold and silver temple vessels.
5,400, that's incredible.
Yeah, we're talking gold basins, silver bowls, ceremonial knives. Nebuchadnezzar had stolen these as a flex of supremacy, like we said. Cyrus gives them back as an investment in stability.
Wow.
And later in the text, during the reign of King Darius, this political motive is stated without any filter.
They just say the quiet part out loud?
Oh, absolutely. Darius commands that funding be given to the Israelites for their daily sacrifices, so that they may, and this is a direct quote, pray for the life of the king and of his sons.
Oh, wow. We will subsidize your religion as long as you put the emperor in your daily prayers.
Exactly. It was a calculated policy to pacify a volatile region and, in the minds of the ancients, avoid the wrath of any local regional gods.
That completely reframes the whole return. So that kicks off this first wave of migration, which is led by a man named Zerubbabel.
Right, stage one of the return.
But, reading through Ezra chapter 2, it is a jarring reading experience.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
The narrative just stops dead to give us these incredibly long, obsessive demographic lists.
Genealogies.
Yes, it literally lists out like the children of Perish, 2,170 and 2, the children of Shephatiah, 370 and 2, and it just goes on for an entire chapter.
It reads like a tax document.
It really does. Why all this obsessive, almost bureaucratic bookkeeping in the middle of a spiritual text?
Well, put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine you, the listener, are trying to prove your identity after your entire society was liquidated 70 years ago.
That would be nearly impossible.
Right. You don't have a passport. You don't have a government database. You definitely don't have a deed to a house.
Because it all burned down.
Exactly. Your ancestry, your genealogy, is the only proof of who you are and where you belong in the social fabric.
Oh, I see.
The genealogies aren't just dry statistics. They are literally the architectural blueprints of a society trying to artificially reconstruct itself from memory.
So your family tree is your deed to the land. It's your right to participate in the community.
Yes. And the text doesn't shy away from how messy this was in practice.
What do you mean?
Well, it specifically mentions families from places like Telmela, who travels all the way to Jerusalem, but couldn't prove their Israelite descent. Yeah, they couldn't verify their father's houses. They were essentially told, sorry, we don't have the paperwork to prove you belong here.
That is heartbreaking. It highlights that going home was a massive bureaucratic struggle.
It brings a level of tragedy to the story that usually gets glossed over, I think.
Seriously. You survive the exile, you make this brutal journey, and you are locked out by a clerical error.
It's a harsh reality of rebuilding a nation.
But Zerubbabel and this first wave do manage to get back, and despite some serious local opposition, they lay the foundation and rebuild the physical structure of the temple.
Which is a massive achievement.
It is, but a rebuilt temple means nothing if the people worshiping inside it are losing their cultural and spiritual identity.
Right, the building is just a building without the community.
Exactly. The center of the religion was alive, but the community was sort of bleeding into the surrounding cultures, which forces a dramatic pivot into stage 2 of our deep dive today.
And this happens years later, under the reign of the Persian king Artaxerxes.
So, set the scene for stage 2.
Well, the physical building is up, but the institutional memory is fading fast. So, enter Ezra.
Right, the namesake of the book.
He is a scribe, deeply learned in the law of Moses, and he leads a second wave of returning exiles to basically restore the intellectual and spiritual foundation of the community.
And his journey is organized like this epic, grueling road trip.
Oh, it's a massive undertaking.
The text gives us the specific timeline. They left Babylon on the first day of the first month, and they didn't arrive in Jerusalem until the first day of the 5th month.
4 solid months of walking.
Yeah, 4 months walking through the ancient Near East. We are talking about moving thousands of men, women, children, and livestock across this really harsh, unforgiving geography.
It is an immense logistical nightmare. I mean, you have to feed them, find water sources, keep the pace slow enough for the elderly and the young.
All while navigating territory that's controlled by hostile tribes.
Exactly.
Which leads to a moment at the river Ahava that I think anyone listening can deeply relate to.
Oh, the Ahava River incident.
It's almost humorous in its humanity, honestly. Ezra is camped at this river. They are about to cross into the most dangerous part of the desert, and he realizes he has walked himself right into a massive trap of his own making.
He faces a severe collision between his theological confidence and the brutal reality of the ancient world.
Yes. Ezra writes that he was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect them on the way,
And why was he ashamed?
because he had just finished lecturing the king. He told Artaxerxes, "The hand of our God is upon all them that seek him for good."
Classic overpromise.
Right. I mean, who hasn't talked themselves into a corner with their own overconfidence in a meeting, only to walk out and realize, oh no, now I actually have to execute this impossible thing without any help?
Essentially told the most powerful monarch on earth, our God is the ultimate protection. We don't need your armed guards.
And then he looks at the wagons, looks at the desert, and absolute panic sets in.
It has to.
Yeah.
Because we need to understand the metrics of what they were carrying. They weren't just transporting a few satchels of coins.
No, the text says they had 650 talents of silver, 100 talents of gold, and 2 vessels of fine bright brass that were precious as gold.
Let's translate that for a modern listener.
Please do, because a talent sounds like a small coin, but it's not.
Not at all. A talent in the ancient world was roughly 75 pounds.
Whoa.
Yeah. That means they were hauling nearly 50,000 pounds of silver and over 7,000 pounds of gold.
That is literal tons of precious metal.
Staggering empire-level wealth, moving at 2 miles an hour in wooden wagons, completely unescorted.
It's basically a slow-moving bank vault with no locks.
The physical weight of the treasure is astounding, but the symbolic weight is even heavier.
How so?
This wasn't just construction funding. This silver and gold represented free will offerings from the Israelites who chose to stay behind in Babylon, as well as grants from the Persian king.
Oh, so it's deeply meaningful money.
Exactly. It was the physical manifestation of their restored identity and their collective hope. Losing it to bandits wouldn't just be financial ruin, it would be spiritual devastation.
So what does Ezra do?
Well, he halts the entire migration. He calls for a fast at the river Ahava. They sit by the water, fasting and praying, begging for a safe path away from, as the text calls them, liars in wait on the road.
And they actually make it.
Miraculously.
The relief when they finally arrive in Jerusalem must have been just overwhelming. On their 4th day in the city, they meticulously weigh out all the silver and gold in the house of God,
Right, they inventory every single piece.
to prove that nothing was stolen or lost. It is this profound moment of cooperative success.
It really is.
So that's stage 2. Ezra brings back the law, the spiritual foundation is restored, and the treasure is secured.
But, and this is a big, but spiritual revival inside a defenseless city is basically a recipe for slaughter.
Exactly. We fast forward again and we hit a massive crisis.
Stage 3.
Yes. Stage 3. The temple is functioning, the laws are being read, but the city of Jerusalem itself is a total death trap.
The walls are still destroyed.
The gates are burned. It is entirely vulnerable to raids. And this brings us to the final stage, and the text introduces a completely different archetype of leader.
Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. Let's talk about him.
So he is not a priest. He is not an intellectual scribe like Ezra. He is the king's cupbearer working directly in the Persian palace.
A very high-level political operative.
Exactly. And when travelers report to him that the remnant in Jerusalem are in great affliction and the walls are still rubble, his reaction is so visceral, he literally sits down, weeps, and mourns for days.
But his grief translates into incredible tactical action.
It does.
He uses his political savvy and his direct access to the emperor. When the king asks why he looks so depressed, Nehemiah, shoots off a quick prayer in his mind, but out loud. He speaks the calculated language of a diplomat.
Well, he knows exactly what he's doing.
He asks for letters of safe passage and requisitions timber from the king's own forest. And unlike Ezra, Nehemiah is a pragmatist.
Very much so.
When the king offers a military escort, Nehemiah gladly accepts the captains of the army and the horsemen. He wasn't going to drag materials across the desert on just faith alone.
No, he was too smart for that. But when he arrives in Jerusalem, the geopolitical landscape he steps into is basically a powder keg.
Right.
The city is surrounded by entrenched political adversaries. The text names Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian.
Let's dig into the why here, actually, because the text says these local governors laughed the Israelites to scorn and accused them of rebelling against the Persian king. But why did they care so much about a bunch of exiles stacking rocks?
It's a great question.
It can't just be petty jealousy.
No, it's entirely about regional power and economics. Think about it. For decades, Jerusalem has been a ruin. That meant these surrounding governors could completely exploit the area. They controlled the trade routes, they manipulated the local markets, and they extracted wealth without any organized resistance.
Oh, so a fortified Jerusalem with giant stone walls completely disrupts their racket.
Exactly. It shifts the balance of power. If Jerusalem can defend itself, Sanballat and Tobiah lose all their leverage.
That makes perfect sense.
That's why they immediately escalate to psychological warfare, threatening to report Nehemiah to the Persian king for sedition.
And rebellion against Persia means complete annihilation. The Persian military would wipe them off the map.
Instantly.
So the workers are facing this immense existential dread alongside the physical agony of clearing decades of compacted rubble.
The stress must have been unimaginable.
Which leads to a detail in Nehemiah chapter 3 that completely blew my mind. It's a testament to their social cohesion.
Oh, I love chapter 3.
The chapter maps out exactly who rebuilt which section of the wall. You have the high priest doing manual labor. But then you have this one verse noting that working side by side to fix the broad wall were a man named Uzziel, who was a goldsmith, and Hananiah, who was a perfumer.
This is the hook from the beginning of the show.
Yes. Two men whose entire livelihoods depended on having pristine, delicate hands, out there hauling jagged rocks and mortar.
It's like asking a master watchmaker, a guy who spends his entire life working with tiny tweezers and magnifying glasses, to suddenly go out into the hot sun and haul 100-pound cinder blocks.
The physical mismatch is just staggering. Think about the blisters, the torn muscles.
It shows just how desperate the community was.
Exactly. Class divisions, professional pride, artistic delicate hands, none of it mattered. Everyone just grabbed a trowel.
It really demonstrates that the wall wasn't just a municipal infrastructure project. It was the physical manifestation of their survival. They worked from dawn until the stars came out, literally with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other.
And they finished the wall against all odds.
In 52 days, which is incredibly fast.
The gates are hung, the doors are shut, the physical perimeter is finally secure. But just when you think the story is wrapping up, they hit the ultimate climax. And it is a fascinating sociological problem.
The empty city problem.
Yes. The walls are massive, but the city is completely empty.
Right. Jerusalem is this great fortress with practically nobody inside. The leaders and administrators lived there, but the vast majority of the returning exiles had settled out in the surrounding agricultural villages.
Which, practically speaking, makes total sense. You can't farm inside a walled city.
No, you need land to grow crops, raise animals, sustain your family.
But an empty fortress is just a trap waiting to be besieged.
Exactly.
So how do you convince people to leave their lucrative farms and move into a high-stress, politically targeted urban center?
They implement a demographic solution that is brilliant, but honestly brutal.
A holy draft.
Right. Nehemiah 11 describes the process. They gather the people and cast lots, essentially a lottery, to bring 1 out of every 10 people from the suburbs to dwell permanently inside Jerusalem.
The 1 in 10 rule.
Yeah. The other 9 get to stay on their land in the surrounding towns.
I really want you listening to put yourself in the shoes of that one person who pulled the short straw.
Would it be terrifying?
Imagine your entire livelihood is tied to the soil. Your family has finally started producing crops after returning from exile, and suddenly the lot falls on you.
You lose everything you just built.
You have to abandon your fields, pack up your family, and move into a barren stone city that is surrounded by enemies who want to burn it down. It was a massive, terrifying sacrifice.
And the community recognized the weight of that sacrifice, too.
Right.
The text notes that the people blessed all the men that willingly offered themselves to dwell in Jerusalem.
It was an act of profound civic duty.
It was the ultimate test of their institutional memory, sacrificing individual prosperity for the survival of the collective.
And that shared sacrifice really sets the stage for the true spiritual culmination of this whole multi-generational effort.
The climax of the journey.
Once the population is stabilized, they all gather in the square to hear Ezra read the law from dawn until midday. And they celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles.
Which is such a vivid celebration. They build temporary shelters, little booths out of branches, and they live in them for 7 days.
To remember their ancestors' time wandering in the wilderness, right?
Exactly. And the text says they did this with very great gladness, noting that it hadn't been celebrated with such unity since the days of Joshua.
But you know, the gladness is so hard-won, it's really mixed with intense pain.
It is.
Because if you look over at Ezra chapter 10, it describes a moment of national repentance where the people are sitting in the open square before the house of God, trembling.
Trembling for 2 very distinct reasons.
Yes. First, they are terrified because they realize they had forsaken their own laws and lost their identity in the surrounding cultures.
The internal decay.
Right. And second, the text makes a point to note, it is pouring rain.
They are just sitting out in the storm.
They're sitting in the mud, freezing, weeping over their failures, doing the excruciating internal work of fixing their society.
And I think the broader takeaway here is deeply rooted in the mechanics of history. Building the external infrastructure, the walls, the gates, the temple, that is only the first step.
The easy part, relatively speaking.
Exactly. The far more difficult task is the internal reconstruction. Nehemiah and Ezra reveal that a society survives not just by laying stone, but by maintaining its institutional memory, enforcing shared sacrifice, and doing the agonizing work of cultural repentance.
Because if the walls are impenetrable, but the society inside has no shared identity, the city will just collapse from within.
That is the real lesson of the rubble.
So, synthesizing this epic journey, the return from Babylon was never a clean, cinematic liberation.
Far from it.
It was a grueling, multi-generational grind. It required 3 distinct stages. Zerubbabel dealing with the bureaucracy of genealogy to build the physical temple.
Ezra risking tons of treasure in the desert to restore the intellectual law.
And Nehemiah navigating Persian geopolitics to secure the physical walls. It demanded watchmakers and perfumers bleeding on stone and farmers abandoning their livelihoods to populate an empty fortress.
They maintained a stubborn, unyielding grip on their identity against unimaginable odds.
And there is one final, lingering historical irony to mull over, isn't there?
Oh, there absolutely is. If we pull all the way back and look at the Persian Empire, Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, they funded this entire restoration for their own geopolitical advantage.
They wanted docile subjects.
Right. In the ancient world, there was an idiom to eat the salt of the palace.
Eat the salt of the palace.
Yeah, it meant you drew a salary from the king, so your loyalty was bought and paid for. The Persians thought they were buying Jewish loyalty with timber and gold.
They thought they owned them.
They did. Yet, by allowing the Israelites to rebuild their walls, reconstruct their temple, and codify their sacred texts under Ezra, the Persian Empire inadvertently bankrolled the survival of a faith and a people that would completely outlast the empire itself.
Wow.
Persia eventually crumbled and fell to Alexander the Great. But the texts codified during this exact period and the cultural identity forged in that rubble, they endured for millennia.
That is a staggering thought.
Sometimes the massive geopolitical systems trying to buy your loyalty end up handing you the exact tools you need to outlive them.
They use the empire's own treasury to buy their eternal survival.
Exactly.
When you are looking at the shattered pieces of a culture or even your own life, the process of putting it back together is never going to be tidy.
Always messy.
It is going to take agonizing time. You will face terrifying vulnerabilities, and you might even need a perfumer to help you pour concrete. But the beautiful truth of the historical record is this. What you build from those broken pieces, if bound together by shared sacrifice, can outlast the very forces that tore it down.
Wonderfully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives, keep exploring the messy realities, and we'll see you next time.